What's up, scholars? We are continuing in our earth science, and today we will be continuing our conversation about the story that the earth tells. The earth is telling a story to you, a story to me, a story about how the earth came to be. Yes, that is a rhyme. We'll throw in a little literacy in here and a little bit of rhyming words. Today, the earth is telling us a story. Remember, there were a couple of keywords that we were talking about, a couple of keywords that we were discussing. We were talking about one of our words is weathering. And remember, weathering is the breaking down of rock. Weathering is the breaking down of rock. It's when rock is weathered and broken. And there are three primary agents of erosion. The three primary agents of erosion are wind, water, and we have ice. We've not got to ice yet, but we will get to ice in a very, very cool investigation. Yes, so remember, agents of erosion are the things that weather, erode, and deposition rocks, are sediments actually. Sediments, broken pieces of rock. So when rock is weathered, we can actually see that weathering because we can hit it and we can see the rock breaking into small sediments. These sediments are soil sediments. You see that? All those little bitty sediments that rock breaks into. And those rocks, sediments, can be eroded. First I weathered them, I broke them, but then I can erode them. And I can blow them literally right into the camera because that's what happened. The agents of erosion are able to weather, break, and to erode, move. It's not much different than if I was to take this and put this ball on it right here. And the ball is steel, but then if let's see if I can get it still. The ball is steel, but then if I erode it, you can see it coming to the camera. That's exactly how sediments do. The same way that the wind was able to move that ball, the wind outside is able to erode sediment. And remember, those sediments are weathered first, then they're eroded, they are transported or carried, and then eventually they reach a place where they are dropped off. They are deposited. If you think of the word deposition, the front of it is deposit. And whenever your parents go to a bank, or at least back in the days when we used to go to banks, we would deposit money in our bank account. Now it's done electronically. Our jobs will deposit money into our account and we can use our debit cards to pull that money out. But the root word is to deposit for deposition or to drop off. Well, today we're going to be taking it a step further because we're going to be talking about what happens when it is deposited. Like, what are the long-term effects of that deposition? Well, while the rock is being eroded, you're going to notice that different things are going to happen to those sediments. Have you ever wondered why this rock is so smooth, but then you take this one and it's very rough and it's very coarse and it's very sharp and it's very pointy? Well, sometimes while sediments are being eroded, they're hitting against each other. They're hitting against each other and they're breaking off all the rough parts and they're being smoothed out and they're being smoothed out. And then these sediments are taken to a point to where they start getting deposited or dropped off into layers. And you think about it much like this. So if I had some sediments, some clay soil that might have been more of an orangish color, and the sediments came and they're dropped off in layers, so they're being sprinkled, and they lay. And then we might have another layer of that same type of sediment. They're being sprinkled, and they're just stacking on top. Remember, deposition, like a cake, is layer making. Now, if I keep stacking these with different types of soil, let's say that first soil was a nice clay soil. Let's say this yellow soil might represent a sandy soil, and then you start coming down into maybe some very, very rich soil from South Texas. Maybe it was some rich soil, and then you start getting another different kind of soil. Now, I'm not saying that soil is green. We're using these just to represent the sediments being dropped off in layers and layers. Now, if you notice, if these layers continue to stack on long enough, they are piling up. Right? They're building up. If this process continues long enough, these sediments are going to start pushing down very heavily on our lower layers, okay? And that pushing down, that compaction, combined with the heat and time of pressure of thousands and thousands of years, will actually take these bottom layers and they form into sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock Sedimentary rock is formed with heat, time, and pressure over thousands of years. Have you ever driven down the highway? Maybe you saw a hill, or maybe you were in a nature park or something, and you looked over to where a river was cutting through a land, and you're able to look and you see that the soil seems to be broken up into layers, and the layers might be different colors. That's how that happened based on this process. And just like that river, remember we were talking about how rivers tell the story of how a canyon is formed, that over thousands of years, that water just slowly carries sediments. It just slowly carries sediments. And those sediments erode that soil away. And eventually we have these gigantic landforms called canyons. Well, on those canyons, we're able to look at and we're able to see all of these different layers of soil sediments that were deposited there. And it's really, really awesome. Okay. So all of these processes work together. So you have one landmass or one rock. That rock is weathered. It's broken into a whole bunch of tiny little pieces. Those tiny little pieces are deposited. They're dropped off into tiny little pieces, right? And then those begin to stack up into the layers like what we just saw. And eventually over thousands of years, we call those layers sedimentary rock layers. And sedimentary rock is a very, very important rock. There's so much that we learn from sedimentary rock, and we're going to talk about many of those things as we continue to go through. But ultimately, there's three primary things that we need to remember. We need to remember first that the earth is telling us a story, and this story involves these processes that we're going to have to learn and be able to recognize, because these processes actually create things called landforms, the way that land form. We need to remember that there are three agents of erosion. There is wind, there is water, and there is ice. Those are the three primary agents of erosion. Agents of erosions, they weather rock. Weathering is the breaking them. They erode rock. Erosion is the taking them, or sediment, should I say. They weather the rock into smaller sediments, and the sediments are eroded, taken, and they are deposited. And deposit, the root word for deposit is deposition. The root word for deposition is deposit, and that means to be dropped off into layers. And those layers can be seen. I don't know if you can see that picture, but if you look at the colors on that rock, you're going to notice that this is like a reddish color, and that's like more of a brownish color, and then they just go from there. It's really, really beautiful, actually, when you look at it. And those processes create different landforms that we find absolutely beautiful. And we're going to talk about more of those landforms very, very soon. We'll do a whole thing just on various types of landforms and see if we can memorize the different kinds of landforms that are created by these processes and that make our earth not only amazing, but just beautiful, just completely beautiful. All right. Y'all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. You are wonderful. You are awesome. You are amazing. You are scientists. You are going to change and transform the known world as we know it using your knowledge and your information, because that's what the future scientists of the world are going to do. Have an absolutely wonderful day. We'll be back on soon with more amazing science.